Hello, my name is Soeren Madsboell from Kimbre in Denmark. I hope you're well seated because next half an hour I would like to share some experience, knowledge with you regarding seed cleaning. I would now turn on the camera and go to my slides and hopefully when sharing screen and get the slides up running, I hope to be ready just by now. As a start, we are looking at a seed cleaning line. And typically we see more than one machine. We have cleaner, indent, gravity separators. And the reason is that one machine alone cannot do the job. But still, each of these are important. Cleaner removing dust, impurities by size. Length separators, indents removing by length. Gravity separator by weight. To make it all work out, you see this client built a nice platform, stairs. It's easy for the operator to go and check and trim the machines. Also, we see nice air system, central aspiration system connected to the machines and going out to the fan. So a nice plant. But again, having a view on the basic machines. For grain, we would typically start with a de-owner for polishing the grain, fine cleaner, separating what impurities we can, indents, and we typically run two jobs. The top one will be around grain separation for broken grain, small weeds. The lower one, long grain indents, could be separating wild oats or straw. Here we see two machines, but this is mainly to bring them up in capacity. Next machine, gravity separator. We have the outlets as a light product, typically have a low germination and should be regarded as a waste for seed, but of course a good feeding product. We could also separate a heavy fraction if there's any stone or soil in the product. But the good seed continue to the next machine, which could be a chemical treater. Most standard seeds are treated with fungi or insecticides to protect the seed before planting. After that, we go into some bagging arrangement. Can be small bags, but also today we typically see big bags. I would like to show you on this 3D drawing because it makes it a bit easier to follow the different machines. And if we should go to the beginning, we see here the intake. And if we go underground, we see, of course, the hoppers where the grain come down. Typical some gates for closing off some of the hoppers, maybe capacity gates also. But otherwise, typically we have a frequency drive on this belt to adjust speed and capacity. And again, yes, we typically use a belt down here because it cleans out nicely and is very gentle to the seed. Above the ground level, of course, there will be a grid on the hopper so the trucks don't fall down. But otherwise, again, we see here this side a dust collecting system. Whenever we unload grain, dust will be released and With this system, we can collect most of the dust. It can be quite important that at least one of the doors in the building is closed when unloading, or wind might cause a draft and take the dust out. If we could succeed in hiding the building, we can better see the machines. And after the intake, the grain come up, and we could start with a pre-cleaner. This will depend on which area we have the seed plant, what amount of impurities we see when the grain come into the plant. If it's a very low level impurities, we can avoid the pre-cleaner and take the grain straight into the fine cleaner. We typically say a fine cleaner can receive with up to 4% impurities and still handle the waste and keep capacity. Before we enter the fine cleaner, we would typically have this de-orner on top, and it's there for polishing the grain. Barley is the most known, could be orns on it, and if they're not broken off, the seed is very difficult to clean. Fine cleaner, air and screen cleaner. So it's a combination of the air system and the correct screens to do the job through the fine cleaner. The clean seed is leaving here, going in the next conveyor, going to the next machine, which would be the indent cylinders. Again, for seed, typical 2 cylinders, one the top making the round grain, smaller seed separation, and the lower one that would be the long grain. Down below could typically be some two-way valves, because depending on what size pockets are on the cylinders, maybe it's good product or waste, and we can change that to the conveyors down below. The clean product will be lifted and go in the next machine. Here in the center, we see a part which is in fact a grading station. If this plant was installed further south, products could be sunflower seed or maize seed, and they would typically need to be graded in size before further use in the plant. But for grain, we would bypass and go to the next machine, being a gravity separator. And in this machine, we would, by separating by weight, of course, we would have a good part would be the good seed. We can separate the heavy, which might be stone or soil, and the very light, which might have a poor germination, would be separated also. Good seed continue. And next machine today would in fact typically be an optical sorter. And not really for making a beautiful looking seed, but more for looking out for difficult weeds, which are very difficult to separate mechanical. Could also be in mixture of foreign grain like barley into wheat. Again, the optical sorter with the correct cameras and settings can also make a shape sizing and separate by that. The good seed, go for the next. In the top here, we have an aspirator, and this is to remove if any dust is creating on its way to here. Before we go down for the chemical treater, when discussing a chemical treater, it's very important to know what seed will be handled, as there's a lot of different models with each their own advantages. Also, it's important to know which kind of chemicals will be needed. Will they be ready mixed, or do we need the mixing tank shown here to do this? Also, there'll be work tanks pumping the liquid to the treater. Afterwards, some scaling equipment, because now we load into bags, and this could either be big bags or standard small bags. In all this text, most important could be in the center. If discussing a pre-cleaner, they can typically handle with up to 10% impurities, but also 20% of moisture in the grain. Of course, I can handle with more of each, but then we should expect reduced capacity in the machines. The pre-cleaners from us would typically be like this, partly open. You can look inside and see the grain, but of course shielded for safety to be safe. Looking inside the machine, we have the inlet up here in the top. There will always be a feeding device having the correct capacity going into the machine. We need air on the machine. It can be a central air system like this, or there could be a fan mounted direct on the machine. The air will be used to separate dust, chaff, light product, and taken out of the grain when entering the machine here. The grain continue down. There will be some screens removing large oversize, next also oversize, dropping down on a sand screen for sand or small impurities before the grain leaves the machine again. We will have a final aspiration, again separating straw, loosened light particles, which we can take with the air. The light parts will be entering these expansion chambers, fall to the bottom, and be removed by a screw conveyor from there. Just to give an idea what we should expect, we see here the light product from a pre-suction taken out from inside the machine. We see these fingers because there's negative air inside, they are drawn against the product, but when there's enough product, the screw conveyor will push it out. If we have a high moisture or huge amount of light product, we can replace these fingers with airlock valves instead. This will be a more safe way to discharge this light product. Also, to give you an idea, scalping screens, the top screens removing the oversize. Grain go down, but we see the large impurities on top traveling down to be discharged. Also the grain, in this we see the grain leaving the machine, the after suction will be inside. Again, we should note the grain is leaving almost on the ground level on the machine, so it always has to be raised on a platform or deck or similar. To make the machine work, it needs the screens inside. And this will be perforated plates and has to be correct size compared to the grain we are cleaning. Today we are punching nearly all the sheets ourselves. And we found, in fact, we could punch quite a lot higher percentage open area in the screen compared to the standard screens we could buy. And screens can be, depending on product, depending on the job, they can be round, slotted, triangular, wire mesh, square openings. So really depending on what the seed, what's the product we need to remove, we use different screens. Below the screens, we have some ball boxes. They are fixed inside the machine, and when the machine starts moving, the balls start to jump. And their job is to bounce on the lower side of the screen to clean the perforation in the screens. If not there, the perforation will close very shortly and no job will be done. In a pre-cleaning, we could expect something like this. This is barley we have cleaned here. The top screen, which seems to be a 10mm round, removed some straw, some large beans, but large impurities. The smaller screen, the sand or sifting screen, has been a 1.5 slotted. We do not expect to lose grain in the pre-cleaning, but any kind of small impurities we should take out here. Of course, the air system has taken some light product out, and we end up with some pre-cleaned grain. Could also be beans, just different screens, but again, oversize, smaller size, air separation, and the pre-cleaned product. All the machines we build are fully assembled in the workshop. When they are ready, let's say at the end of the day, they are being made ready for a test. They are fully loaded with all screens and ball boxes inside. On the floor, they are shimmed, so we know they are well supported in all four corners. And then they are started for one night. And the idea is that tomorrow morning, a sheet can be filled. A lot of good points need to be checked before the machine can leave. And some of them are all bearings. We measure the temperature to see if the bearings are okay. Also the motors, the amp use on the motor is all tested. Any moving parts are checked, jerked to the correct jerk before the machine is ready. A small machine is easy. It can go straight on a truck or into a container. But typically the larger machines, they have to be taken apart. And this model, you see the two larger pieces. This one go on top here, and it's fairly easy to bolt together, connect the rods, and the machine will rather quickly be ready for use. For all our machines, we have dimension drawings. Would like to show some buffer bins, hopefully with some low and high level sensors for good supply of grain. We like an open area around the machine, so it's good for change of screens, open area for service around, so it can be well maintained. Also here given some dynamic loads, weight from the machine, and of course this should be taken in consideration when building a platform or how the machine is installed. I mentioned the air, and here we see a machine with a fan direct mounted on top of the cleaner. Air go here into a cyclone, separating dust, but the air go through the roof. Also, we see here the machine on a platform because the grain was leaving here, and we need some collecting hopper for the grain to go out and most likely into an elevator outside the door. Waste is collected in this screw together with the dust from the cyclone and is collected into a container. So the air system can be in quite a lot of different ways. We just saw the most simple on the photo, like up in this corner. Almost the same, but the fan could be installed on top of the cyclone instead on the cleaner, but still the same kind of easy installation. If it should be a bit more sophisticated, we could have a stronger fan on the ground, silencer. Also having the advantage now we can tie more equipment into this suction line and make aspiration on these also. Always with the cyclones, we should discuss what is our area. Can we be allowed to separate fine dust outside the building? Or what would the regulations be? Because the cyclones will typically separate 75 up to 90% of the dust. And of course, this is nice, but we need to consider the remaining 10, 15% fine dust, which will leave with the air. To avoid this, our advice is using a filter, more or less same setup, but inside our filter socks, so the air is really filtered before it's leaving with the fan here. It will be a much nicer, cleaner system, but also quite a lot more expensive, at least double or maybe triple the price compared to cyclone and fan. Just to show a small system, we have the filter, the fan here, connected to cleaner, to indent, but again, other machines are tied into this system. So small, easy system. But of course, if we go to a larger system, it has to be well calculated to make sure we have the correct speed in and dimension on the pipes to ensure the dust is getting to the filter and not settling in any of the pipes. I would also like to mention some grass seed pre-cleaners. Mainly because grass seed is typical, a more light product, and typically we see more dust and straw in the incoming product. So the grass seed pre-cleaners would be in this position, is prepared for this, receiving this product. Typical grass seed is handled in boxes. So in a grass seed line would see maybe starting with the box tilter, going to the pre-cleaner, would see some brush machines, seed continuing to the fine cleaner, afterwards go into indented cylinders also. Of course, also an air system because a lot of dust is coming into with the grass seed. And of course, different models depending on needed capacity. But what is quite typical for the grass seed pre-cleaner is the discharge of the waste. Typical a tray like this so that we can discharge straw, big amount of waste without it settling inside the machine. Also typical on top of the grass seed pre-cleaners, a belt feeder, because it can much better handle slowly floating product like grass seed compared to feed rollers, shaker feeders, or what else could be used. So the belt feeder, very slowly feeding the product down. There can be an extra treasure here, a straw shaker, before we get to the screens. And again, would be scalping screens and sand screens like another pre-cleaner. In this grass seed line, we would, without question, see a polishing machine. And for grass seed would typically be a brush machine. In short, brushes rotating inside and polishing the grass seed up against this wire as we see here. Idea is to loosen double seed, remove dust, chaff from the seed so they can float more easily in when we get to the cleaning. And Yes, the brush machines would be in this location after pre-cleaning, so we have removed sand, stone, what else, as they could make damage to the brush machines, but before the fine cleaner, so they would be in this position. If it was grain, we would typically have a de-order to polish the grain before we can fine clean it. Again, favorite would be this position. The pre-cleaner has removed sand, stone, whatever could make damage inside the de-order. And the de-order itself, most typical job would be barley. We see here a quite dirty sample with but especially we need to notice the awns on the barley. If the awns are not removed, it's very difficult to clean down below. So the product would enter here, the steel fingers rotating in the product, breaking off the awns, polishing the grain, and the polished product together with dust and whatever is leaving here, it go to the cleaner afterwards. To give the correct job, we can trim the gate, the bottom gate in the de-order. And like shown this, we have a very short time before grain entering and then until leaving again. Opposite down here, the gate is almost fully closed and we have a full durance inside before the grain is leaving. And again, this is up to the experienced operator to see how much do I need to polish my grain. If too much, we can easily start to loosen the skin on the grain and create damage. If we should have it the full use, we often connect an amp meter on the motor. Then we can really watch how heavy is the motor loaded and how hard is the machine working. Now we got to this point, and this is, in fact, what I planned to end my first part of the session. And this is to make room for questions and comments. So I will stop here.